Neurological Disorders, Lesson 1.5. How do the parts of my brain work together? The goals of this lesson are to demonstrate the native structures of the brain to work together to create and control behaviors, and to demonstrate that disorders can develop if specific areas of the brain no longer function. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to explain why different parts of the brain need to work together to create and control behavior, name the functions of Broca and Wernicke's areas, and diagnose patients with Broca's, Wernicke's, and conduction aphasias. We'll achieve these goals with a card sort and discussion of the steps involved in language processing and a patient diagnosis. To prepare for this lesson, you'll need to review the key scientific concepts presented in it. They include the neural steps to process language, including the brain regions involved and the functional specificity of those brain regions, as well as disorders and symptoms caused by deficits in language processing brain regions, including Broca's aphasia, Wernicke's aphasia, and conduction aphasia. You can review this content in the background reading provided to you in the teacher primer, the teacher manual, and the student workbook. The teacher primer provides in-depth knowledge about the scientific content presented in this lesson. The teacher manual or lesson plan provides minute-by-minute explanation of the lesson structure, including instructions on how to manage the discussion and activity, and the student workbook provides additional explanation for students. To prepare for this lesson, you'll need to be sure to print Do Now cards and homework worksheets. And finally, you'll need to double-check that the embedded videos on PowerPoint slides 21 and 22 will play on your classroom computer. If you do have problems playing the videos within the PowerPoint slides, you can download them from the ND Multimedia Backup. A link to this backup is provided on the webpage for Lesson 1.5. The key point of the lessons Do Now is the discovery of neural steps involved in processing language. We'll get there with a card sort. You'll give each pair of students a set of Do Now cards for them to sort. The 9 cards are written such that if students are reading carefully, they should be able to order them fairly easily. The key point of the discussion is to review and elaborate on the neural steps to process language, including the brain regions involved and the functional specificity of these brain regions. We'll get to these key points with a Socratic discussion. The lesson PowerPoint is set up to allow you to review the correct order of the Do Now cards, which describe the neural steps involved in processing language. At each step, you'll review and elaborate on the function of the specific region involved. For more information about each of the following steps, please see the teacher manual. The steps in order are: number 1, Sam wants or plans to read The Cat in the Hat to his friend Pam. 2, Sam puts on reading glasses and looks at the cat in the hat. 3, Sam's optic nerve transmits information from his eye to his occipital lobe. 4, the information is transmitted from the occipital lobe to the thalamus. 5, the information is transmitted from thalamus to Wernicke's area. 6, the information is transmitted to Broca's area. 7, the information is transmitted to the motor cortex. 8, signals from the motor cortex are sent to the brainstem and down the spinal cord. 9, the motor neurons from the spinal cord connect to muscles of the mouth and throat. Sam's mouth produces the words he has read. After reviewing the neural steps Sam's experiencing to read The Cat in the Hat, you'll transition to Pam and ask the students, what about Pam? What happens in her brain as she listens to the story? Students should be able to predict that Wernicke's area for understanding and Broca's area, if she speaks, will be active. Additionally, because Pam is listening to the story, her auditory cortex and her temporal lobe will be active. The image on slide 14 allows you to review the many areas of the brain required to process words. These images are taken from a PET scan as the subject is doing different things with words, hearing them, seeing them, speaking them, and thinking about them. You'll ask your students to look at these images and determine what areas are most active as the subject is completing each of these actions. For hearing, it's the temporal lobe, including Wernicke's area. For seeing, it's the occipital lobe. For speaking, it's Broca's area and the motor cortex. For thinking, it's the frontal lobe. You'll then ask the students to predict what would happen if any of these areas was damaged, which will be the focus of our wrap-up. The key point of the wrap-up is to provide examples of disorders caused by deficits in specific brain structures. Since we've been using language as our example in this lesson, we'll introduce disorders caused by deficits in language processing brain regions. The disorders we'll cover are Broca's aphasia, Wernicke's aphasia, and conduction aphasia. We'll get to this key point with the discussion in patient diagnosis. In the wrap-up, which is slightly longer than our usual wrap-up, you'll first introduce the patients to Broca's aphasia, named after Paul Broca, who described patients who could understand language but not speak. After the patients died, he performed autopsies on their brains and saw that they all had damage in a region of their frontal lobes. This area is now called Broca's area. Next, you'll introduce students to Wernicke's aphasia, named after Karl Wernicke, who described patients who could speak but could not understand language. And again, after the patients died, he performed autopsies on their brains and saw that they all had damage in a region of their temporal lobe. This area is now called Wernicke's area. Then you'll introduce students to a third type of aphasia, conduction aphasia. Patients with this aphasia can understand language and have no motor difficulties when they speak. However, they are unable to speak coherently, often omitting words or using incorrect words. And you'll ask the students to predict where are their brains damaged. These patients have damage in the connection between Broca and Wernicke's area. Finally, you'll have the students watch two videos embedded on slides 21 and 22 of patients with these aphasias. You'll ask the students to diagnose which type of aphasia each has. Caution: this does tend to be a tricky assignment for students because it involves paying careful attention to the patient's dialogue and noticing the difference between being able to speak and being able to understand, and being able to do both. The first patient, Sarah Scott, has Broca's aphasia, and you know that because she has difficulty creating speech. The second patient has Wernicke aphasia, and you know that because she speaks fluently, although incoherently. It's almost like babbling. Plus, the slide starts with Wernicke's aphasia. The key point of the homework is to review examples of disorders caused by deficits in specific brain structures, which for this lesson means disorders caused by deficits in brain structures responsible for processing language. We'll get to this key point with a patient diagnosis. For homework, students will complete a worksheet that has them read scripts of 3 different patients who each have an aphasia. Students are charged with diagnosing each patient based on the scripts. If students need assistance, they can refer to the workbook reading for today's lesson. Students often ask for more details about the aphasias. You can find more in the Teacher Primer, Teacher Manual, and Student Workbook. One of the most common questions teachers get is, how is Sarah Scott doing now? After quite a bit of rehab, she is doing much better. And if time allows, you can watch some of her stroke anniversary videos that are posted on YouTube. She posts one every May to show her level of rehabilitation. Since this lesson discusses language and touches upon language disorders, you may also get the question, what causes stuttering? And the answer to this one is yet another great example that science doesn't know everything yet, because we're still not totally sure. But studies are indicating that there are abnormalities in the brain. In contrast to normal speakers, individuals who stutter show deactivation of the left hemisphere sensory motor centers and overactivation of homologous right hemisphere structures during both stuttered and non-stuttered speech. The essential defect is hypothesized to be a lack of sensory motor integration necessary to regulate the rapid movements of fluent speech. At the end of this lesson, students should appreciate how many different brain structures are involved in doing something we mostly take for granted, like processing language. Additionally, students should be able to predict brain regions with structural deficits based on a patient's behavioral or functional symptoms. This lesson concludes Unit 1 and ties together many themes we've seen throughout it and will continue to see throughout the rest of the module, including the brain is composed of many structures, each with a specialized function. Many brain structures need to work together to create and control our behaviors, and when a brain structure is compromised, its function is compromised, resulting in disordered behavior. Don't forget, if you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, to let us know. You can contact any of the CTSE team members, and we'd be more than happy to help you.